Everyone, today I'm going to do a review of a show called Smallville, and people are really familiar with this show. And today I'm going to talk about the pilot, and um, really I kind of want to first explain that at first I didn't want to like this show, uh, but it was really hard to avoid this new show that was coming on the WB called Smallville. At the time, when Smallville was the first season of Smallville was going to air. It also, I believe, Roswell was entering its third and final season, and which is another show that I followed, another show that I liked, another similar show, and I didn't want to like it because they were on the same time, different networks on the same timeline, and I knew that if I liked Smallville, that wouldn't look good for the other show because it would draw away viewers, and because they were at the time on the same time slot. So I didn't want to like the show when I was watching it because I felt that if I watched Smallville, that it would hurt the ratings to Roswell, to its final season, because they aired, I believe they aired in the same season. One of Smallville was on the WB, and Roswell, the third season, the final season was on UPN. So, to make a long story short, Roswell, it was its last season. I don't know if it did it to the show did end. So, but watching Smallville and all the promos that came out, it was really hard to avoid it. And they hyped it up as a show where it was Superman growing up, and as you know, the Superman, Supergirl are my favorite like DC character type. I'm not really familiar with a lot of the other DC characters, but I'm really familiar with Superman and what becomes of him later on. He becomes Superman and all that. So I found the idea of the show interesting because I already liked the comic character. So going into the pilot, I didn't want to like it, but I did watch it, and what do you know? I liked it. The show starts off with a meteor shower, so you see like this little meteor shower, and it's revealed that this meteor shower is really the responsible for how Clark Kent got to Earth. Clark Kent gets well, his foster family, they find him out there in the meteor shower, and they decide to adopt him. So growing up, so they adopt him and they grow up, and it's really unclear if, I don't really know if he grew up knowing he had powers or not, or he grew up just thinking he was different. I don't think that was explained, because later on it flashes back to when he's older and he knows he can speed, but he doesn't know that he's an alien yet in the pilot. So what ended up happening is there's a accident where there's Lex Luthor, and his car goes out of control, and it almost hits Clark Kent off this bridge. I felt so alone. I kept myself on. Lex Luthor, who's actually the villain in the comics, of the major villain of Superman, and what ends up happening is Lex Luthor, he thinks that he hit Clark Kent, which he's made of steel, so it didn't kill him. So that kind of forms a friendship with those two, and a bond. And what ends up happening there is eventually Clark's father kind of explains to him where he's from. Unclear to me that I think the only power he knew at the time was he can super speed. None of his other powers have formed yet. So his father tells him that he's an alien from another planet, and he doesn't take it well. So, also in this show, we have Pete, which is Clark's friend, and Chloe. And so those are the main ones that he hangs out with, his group of people at school. His friend Chloe has developed a thing called the Wall of Weird, and it's pretty much a wall of all the freaks of that, freaks of the week kind of that have happened since the meteor shower.
Anna? It's all my fault.
The meteors come down and they cause certain. It affects people in certain ways as we go into the show. So one of the first villain, so to speak, in the pilot is, in the pilot when the meteor shower happened, there was a guy that was hanged up on a cross. So what ends up happening is this guy was actually affected by the meteor because the meteor and the green kryptonite that come down it affected the guy that was on the cross, and it actually made him not age. So what people are seeing, Clark and everybody, Clark and Chloe and Pete from the Wall of Weird, they're actually seeing that he hasn't aged. So this actually, the guy that he, because what ends up happening is Clark ends up being the Scarecrow in present day time. So he ends up getting he ends up getting on the cross because he's interfering with Lana, who is his crush, but Lana is with a football player named Whitney. And Whitney sees this, and he's a little jealous, so he's the one that ends up putting him on the cross in the present day time. So what ends up happening, though, is Lex Luthor sees that Clark is on this cross, and he gets him down.
Clark? Oh, jeez. Who did this to you, okay? Well, at least let me give you a ride.
Saves him from that. And so what ends up happening, though, is Clark does confront this guy that, the freak of the week guy that was on the cross at the beginning of the pilot. He ends up confronting him, and he ends up, he gets electrocuted somehow, and that causes kind of his aging to come back. They have a little scene between the two of them, a little fight, but at the end of it, he gets electrocuted, and he reverts back to his older, aged body. So that's kind of how the style goes with the show. We had a freak of the week in the pilot, and that's kind of the template of how season 1 goes. Is there's a freak of the week every episode. They don't change their style until season 2. Most of the episodes in season 1 are freak of the week. There's a villain that's affected by the meteor and that kind of thing, and it's somebody that Clark has to come up against. And there's small little arcs along the way. So that's kind of how season 1 lays out, especially the pilot. I think the night that the Smallville premiered, I think it was a 2-parter. I'm not really sure, because it depends on when you're watching it, because the pilot kind of loops in with the next episode, but I'll talk about that on my next review. So what ends up happening here is, Clark just comes to terms with who he is, and that's kind of how the pilot ends. It's Clark accepting who he is. So anyway, that's kind of how it ends. Clark is ready to embrace his alien side and come to terms with whoever comes his way. With and he's still in high school, so he's still grown up. His powers haven't formed. The only power that he has right up to this point is super speed, and his other powers haven't formed yet. So that does come later in season 1 as well. So watching the pilot, it did hook me right away, but I still did like my other show. It didn't draw me away from the other show. It just became another show that was similar to the show that I liked as well. Two shows about the same thing, kind of the same thing that I was very into. So I liked Smallville. I did watch every episode of season 1, so so it became a big favorite of mine. But it took me, a couple episodes to kind of see where they were going to go with their story. So I'm going to be going over. I'm going to break down kind of episode by episode of this show. Unless I get to an episode that I haven't seen, I'll do a reaction to it. But if I've seen the episode, I'll do just a review on it. But I did like the pilot. I liked it did handle all the characters well, introduced all the characters that well on this show. So anyway, if you guys like this review, stay tuned for more. I will be going over this show in the future on my tier. So other than that, stay tuned for more reactions and reviews.